Yeah, let's begin. I'm honored that I was asked to do this. Um, uh, our friendship with Yosef and Shura goes back a long time to when they first came to North Carolina. So the topic that I was asked to present on was poems, Yiddish poems about mothers. So in a certain sense, we're all an expert on this. Everybody either is a mother, has a mother, everybody had a mother. But anyway, when my mother died, I think it's 10 years ago, I decided that the way that I wanted to honor her and sort of say Kaddish for her, I also said some Kaddish, was to create a blog of poems, Yiddish poems about mothers. So everything that we're going to be reading today, okay, let's let my sister in, admit one. Okay, everything that we're going to be reading today can be found on the blog. So if you, and the blog is either you can go shevazucker.com/blog, or you can just Google Candles of Song or Liederlicht. And you can find all of these poems. And also you will find them with the biography of each of the poets, both in Yiddish and English, a reading of the Yiddish. I don't think I read the English, I can't remember already, and the text in Yiddish transliteration and in English. So it's all there. So let's begin with the poem that gives the blog its name. And you can, as we go through these poems, think about which one, if any, somehow speaks to your mother. Can I, Michael, can I press on the X for the transcript so I don't keep seeing that?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, okay, great. So the first poem is by Rachel Viprinsky, and here you see her here. She looks like a lovely lady with fantastic hair. Afila after Elter, I'm jealous. And her poem is called Frum. And I'll read it in Yiddish first and then in English. No, let's do the other way. Piously. Piously, my mother blessed her candles. I light the wicks of songs. Eyelashes covered, fingers grow luminous, lips once again trembling in awe. For joy and for sorrow, for aging wit, God put the word of your mouth into mine. The word not yet bloomed that sleeps in the stone, in the dust down below. Wake it up. Let it blossom forth anew, as if in the flower bed, in the line harvest of my poems. And the pain and the woe and the grief of the world, I put before you in your presence, piously, as my mother, the waxen wicks, I light my candles of song. So, Frum hat mein Mame gebencht ihre Licht. And as I'm reading this, think about what exactly is she saying and what is her relationship to her mother and who is pious. Frum hat mein Mame gebencht ihre Licht. Ich ziehen die Knoten von Lieder, die wie es beschirmt, slichtigen Fingern, Lippen in Feuchtigkeit zittern wieder. Vor Freud und vor Zar, vor dem Seichel bei Jort, gib mir Gott von dein Mäuel in mein Mäuel das Wort. Das Wort, was hat noch nicht gezwieht, was schlaft in dem Stein, in dem Stäub, in der Nieder. Weck es auf, lass es aufblühen frisch, wie in Beit, in der Schurreschnitt von meinen Liedern. Und dem Wind und Weh und Zar von der Welt stell ich vor dir, vor dein Angesicht. Frum wie mein Mame die wachsene Knoten, zieh dich meine Liederlicht. Okay, so I want this to be interactive. It's a class, not a lecture. So what is the poet saying, do you think? And we're only going to be able to give each of these the very most cursory reading, because I want us to have at least 4 or 5 by the end. What is she saying about her connection to her mother? Michael, any hands?
So I'll say, if you want to interject or ask a question, feel free to unmute and ask. If you're wanting to ask during the talk, you can use the raise hand function.
Okay, any thoughts? Is this a complete break with tradition? Is this a continuation? Is it a revolt? What do we see here?
I see that Bani Bazia is unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I without seeing the beginning again,
I'll roll it up.
reading it with some needless to say, with emotion. I can see my mother, with her veil on her head and her hands over her eyes, and I mean, she always lit the sharpest candles. And but I wanted to ask a question, and my Yiddish is not fluent. But at the end, the last stanza, it says, "Piously as my mother, the waxen wicks." And I was wondering, you said "voxen," and I'm thinking of growing.
No, that would be Vaxendika.
Okay.
Okay.
So I didn't know if there was some
that's
double.
interesting.
I didn't know if there was a double meaning there. So I was, the candles are going down, but feeling the emotion growing. But
it's interesting. I think in English you could make a case for it.
Yeah, but not Yiddish.
Because the moon waxes and wanes, but it's not impossible. They weren't always so, according to the book with grammar, but I think she would have said Vaxendika, or if she were really sort of Germanish, Vaxenda, not Vaxena.
Right.
Good. So what do
it's lovely.
So the question, I think you've posed a good question for me to pick up on. So her mother is lighting the candles. Is she going to light the candles? What's your sense of it?
I think she does, if I may.
Who's speaking? You know what? Always say who you are. Just
so Steve Heisler.
Okay, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, I think she is. I think she's taking. I mean, it's hard to tell because I only got to read it once.
Right.
But it sounds as though the sense of the poem that I'm getting is that she's struggling to find her mother in the dirt, in the skies, in the things that she does, to sort of reach her mother's piety, to reach her mother's view of the world. And and in spite of how difficult things are, she somehow is able to reach that connection to her mother and to the world that her mother put before her, for want of a better word. But she lights the candle right at the end. I light my candles of song.
But I light my candles of song.
Right, but this is her way. It's her way of connecting. She's lighting candles, just not necessarily waxing candles.
Okay.
I have a thought.
Who's speaking?
My name is Betty.
Okay.
I think that there becomes a time when you as the daughter and then becoming the mother yourself, and then there's that period of time when you lose your mother. And it's that transformation where you're the one who, when you're doing the things that your mother has done so many times before, and you're the one who is doing it. And it's that not only now are you doing those things that you have done before with joy, but there's that sadness that those things that you did as a child at your mother's knee um, that you're doing as a mother with your child isn't at your knee.
Okay, good.
There's that mixed grief because she's not there anymore, and the fact that you're talking about the pain and the grief in the world, it's that suddenness of the weight that you don't have that person to turn to.
Mhm.
That was the sense that that last stanza came to me.
Okay, Susan Gans, I saw a hand.
I think a lot of us could find ourselves in the place of the one who writes this poem. When we light the candles, it's not necessarily from Frumkeit, but we have the connection with Yiddish and song, and we're going to continue to light the candles, but from a different point, just like our mothers, but from a different standpoint, just as we're doing now with Yiddish song. Maybe that's our standpoint.
Okay. So since we want to go on and we could spend a long time, I'll just say that I read it maybe a little differently. Ich will reden jetzt ein bisschen auf Jiddisch, weil ich sehr gerne Vaisman ist da. Will ich sein sicher, dass sie versteht. So, ich meine, Gitta, guck, was sie sagt. Take a look at what she sees. Frum hat mein Mame gebencht ihre Licht. Ich sind die Knoten von Lieder. Ja? Is ich mein, als die Poetesse sind nicht kein Licht. Als ihre Lieder seien die Licht. Ja? Aber sie sagt, als in dem Zinden die Knoten von Lieder, ist sie Punkt also frum wie ihr Mame. Ja, sie ist da in dem ihr Schaffen. Ja, das ist wie sie verbindet sich mit Gott durch ihre Lieder und nicht durch Anzünden die Shabboslicht. That's how I see it, that she's probably, and given the time, she's a secular Yiddish poet, she is probably not lighting Shabbos candles, but she is lighting song candles. And that is her way of continuing. Now you can say, oh, but it's not going to work. And, will her kids be Jewish? And she, whatever, we can get into all of that. That the poem is not addressing that. Das Lied is verinteressiert mit dem, as sie fehlt, as a hemshach. There's a continuity between herself, her mother and herself. It's in terms of their piety, in terms of their maybe even believing in God, but they express it in different ways. As Susan said, maybe through song, maybe through poetry, maybe also through lighting candles. We don't know, but the song is very important, I think. So that's just how I read it. Lass mir gehen zu a Zweitlied. Now this poem, I think, is the most, I thought, of all the poems, I don't know what Asya would say, but which poem did I think Asya might feel would embody her mother? And so this is one that I love. By Rezel Zhichlinsky, und Lamer Akukton, auf Rezel Zhichlinsky, da ist sie mit einem interessanten weißen Hut. Okay, so, Mama, you made fire, thin sticks of wood you fanned into a sun. You hear my hair rustling, oh, thank you, thank you. But outside the wind is still wailing. Take the wind, mother, into your apron and rock him to sleep. The wind will trust you and like a little lamb will close his eyes. Mame, du hast Feier gemacht, hast von Dare Sticklach Holz zerblosener Sun. Du herrst wie meine Haar schäubern a Dank. Nur in Dreußen weint noch alt der Wind. Nimm ihn, Mame, in dein Schürze rein und wieg ihm ein. Der Wind, wird dir glauben und wie ein Schapsel zumachen die Augen. Okay, so what kind of picture do we see now of the mother? Is she fierce? Is she loving? What is she? Is she powerful? Is she meek?
This is Basi again. I think she's loving and very strong. And I mean, again, I think of my mother. I still have the mother-daughter aprons that my mother had made for us. And she sewed very well, but I'm not sure if she made them or someone else did, and I can't part with them. And they have little hearts on them. But just think, and mothers wore aprons then. So those of us who lived in in that era, I can actually see the apron. But and I look and rocking the wind to sleep, and just utilizing the word rock again and thinking of her as being strong like a rock. And then the little lamb. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous, but you can feel the mother's strength, but in a loving, coddling way. I mean, more protection. Yeah.
Okay, so it's so interesting. Steve Heisler, when you said, I heard Eichler. Heichwell. Okay. Yeah. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Were you asking me a question?
no, I'm just saying I didn't realize before when you were speaking that it was you.
Oh,
I heard the name differently. So it's so interesting what translation can bring up unintentionally. So
Yeah.
the rock, that's interesting in English. It's definitely not there in Yiddish. The word is vegan, and it has absolutely no connections to rocks, but it's fascinating what a different language, what you come up with.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple of things about, did anybody else will noch einmal nehmen a Wort?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Steve? Yeah?
Yeah,
Shmuel?
it's just that it's very interesting because both the other poem and this poem, I mean, are reminding me a lot of some English poems that I've read in my life. And one of the things here is how, I don't know if you know the poem called Those Winter Sundays.
No, I think so.
It's I can't think of the author's name now. It's an African-American poet, modern poet. But it's the same thing, except there's more of a struggle in there, in that the father makes fire, the father makes the heat in the house, and he does all these things. He's powerful, and yet he also does gentle things like shining their shoes and things like that. And I think that's what this is very reminiscent of, this enormous power that the mother has to create fire, to fan the sun, can also, take something huge and powerful and make it gentle, make the wind a lamb, which is, it's this wonderful kind of play between, she doesn't get to it too much. The guy in the Winter Sundays, he does this sort of struggle between the seductivity and the power of a parent, and how a parent, it becomes this hugely important figure in your life that that becomes part of the way in which you exist. That's interesting.
Good. Okay. Nesia, is it?
Nessia, yeah.
Oh, Nesia. Okay.
Actually, you ended up, whoever was talking just now ended up saying very much what I was going to say, which is that we see really a whole lot of sort of the child's perspective of the parent. Because when you're very small, you kind of you get this image of your parents, and often, probably not universal, but a lot of times I think you get kind of your parent can do everything, and that's kind of how you expect children to feel. So you certainly see a lot of it here, but beyond that, it's beautiful imagery. I really like it.
Good. Now, the other thing that I want to say is I don't actually think there's a struggle, as Steve mentioned in what is it called? Sundays. I'd like to, after, write me the name of the poem. You send me an email, okay? I'd like to look it up. It's not really a struggle. for her. I mean, in the eyes of her daughter, she is all powerful, sie ist mächtig, sie hat Koyach, aber sie ist euch sehr, sehr edel und gut und warm. Und die zwei kämpfen nicht einer gegen dem anderen. There's no struggle. That's just who she is.
Right.
Und sie nimmt ein dem Wind nicht mit Koyach, nur sie wiegt ihm ein. It's just so beautiful. But what do we make of this line? Du hörst wie meine Haarscheibern a Dank. What's that all about? You hear my hair rustling, a thank you.
Oh.
How do we understand that? I remember once presenting this poem, and Barney Zumov, Oliver Sholem, was there, a Yiddish translator, and he just couldn't understand this line. And I sort of held back and I said, well, I thought maybe it's because you have no hair. I don't know. But it's like, this is such a woman kind of a line, I think, such a mother line. So what do we see here?
This is Diana. I picture
Diana.
a mother brushing her daughter's hair.
Right. And where, maybe? What's the line before? Hast fundare Sticklach Holz zerblazene Azun. From thin sticks of wood you fanned into a sun.
In front of the fire, in front of the hearth, where
That's what I
after
think.
washing her hair, she's brushing it out and it's drying in the warmth of the hearth.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I remember when especially my second daughter, when she was little, just taking her on my lap and, drying her hair, not in front of the fireplace, but it was just a very intimate moment. So you can picture this in a shtetl and being in front of the fireplace because that's where it was warm. And you know how hair kind of sparks in sometimes if it comes a little too close to the fire, that's kind of what I see. And when she says, I mean, this is kind of a mix, these are synesthesia, mixed senses. You hear my hair rustling, a thank you, right? You might not generally hear hair, but you can think of those sparks making a tiny, tiny little sound as the daughter is near the fire. That's how I see it. Let's go to a poem of a totally different nature. This is by Bela Schechter Gottesman, and for those of you who aren't familiar or who want more of her, there's going to be a session today about her work, probably mostly the singing, but I'm not sure. Either way. So Bela Schechter Gottesman, as you can see, was quite contemporary. I'm sure that many people in this room, Zoom room here, perhaps met Bela. If you're anywhere in the New York area, you might have even been at her house. And Bela had a daughter who was, it wasn't Downs. Let's say she was intellectually arrested, developmentally, because of something that had happened in her childhood. Her name was Tybela. Unfortunately, she died an early death. And I think at least this describes the situation. Tybela, I'm not sure when, but at a certain point, she went to live in a group home. But she would come home and visit with her parents fairly often. So that I believe that's the setting for this poem, that Tybela has been there, and now she's gone, and all the feelings that this arouses within her. The slow walk. Her slow walk breaks my heart. The ache of unrealized goals stretches into the future, waiting for other mornings and afternoons. Rainy days still darken my window panes, and she What do I know about her now? Is she talking with someone? Is she laughing at someone? Are her eyelashes lowered because she longs for me as I, with her shadow trailing after me, long for her? And I struggle to tie together things not achieved, and still I remain empty. Shall I always be like this after her leaving, longing, still longing for her slow walk? Ihr verhaltener Trott. Ihr verhaltener Trott verklemmt mir dem Atem. Das Engschaft von nicht ergangene Zielen streckt sich auf später, auf Warten, auf andere Morgens und bei Toden tagregnerische Vertunkeln noch meine Fensterscheiben. Und sie, was weiß ich jetzt von ihr? Sie rät sie mit wemmen, sie lacht sie von wemmen, sie ist herabgelost ihr Wehr, weil sie bänkt nach mir, wie ich, ziehen die Kirschschatten mit, bänk nach ihr. Und ich prüf zu neu binnen, das nicht der Gerechte, und bleib ausgeledigt fort. Und ich will schon als euch Tommy bleiben, nach ihrer Wegfahren, bänkendig, als bänkendig, nach ihr verhaltenem Trott. Okay, so the word verhalten, I mean, I think it's well translated, but I just want to give you all the possible meanings that it could be in Yiddish, and that is detained, delayed, stopped, arrested. Okay, so any of those might have worked. Now, those of you that know Yiddish, just look at the first two lines and what real glaring difference do you see in the translation? Any hands? Verklemmt mir dem Atem, Raphael.
Yes, autumn is nicht Harz.
Wir kennen nicht Herren.
Ich will reden ein bisschen höher. Ist
Ja.
das gut? Gut. Autumn is nicht Harz. Verklemmt mir dem Autumn. It catches my breath. And in fact, it could be a sign of wonder as opposed to breaking the heart. I'm not sure which is better, but verklemmt mir dem Atem is not quite breaks my heart.
Right, it's not. And I think it's really important. And verklemmt would be more, I think everybody knows verklemmt from Saturday Night Live, right? I'm verklemmt, right? So I'm like in a vice, something is constricted. And if you look at the Yiddish, I don't want to say that it's not well translated because I think it's a beautiful translation, but what do you notice about the punctuation in Yiddish? There is none.
There is none. There is none.
He put some in English, but I think, and it's funny, as many times as I've read this poem, wie viel Mal ich soll nicht haben gelernt das Lied, habe ich sich erst heint oder Nächten in der Früh gehabt. Oh my goodness, dem Atem, das alles wird herausgesagt in ein Atem. It's one big breath. So that, you know, she's just putting out all her emotions that are obviously, you can't do this in one breath or you would die, right? There's too much there. But I think the idea is that she is just spilling out everything she feels. Ja, es gießt sich von ihr, als was sie fühlt wegen dem Kind. And so I think it's really important that it not be heart, that it be breath. Or at least let's keep that as we look at the Yiddish, because this is about having no more breath, because she just doesn't. She has to get all these emotions out. Good. So what does she feel? What is she telling us? So many different emotions come up.
I'll go back to verklemmt dem.
Yeah.
You catch your breath. like she caught her breath and held it in.
Mm. She held it in, and it's so much of nicht der Gangen, yeah, which means, how does he say it? Unrealized, right? Never getting there, right? And again, the Yiddish is beautiful because it's about trot, which is physically steps. It's a walk. So again, we have this idea of the walk, the arrested walk of goals to which Tybala can never really get. Yeah, no matter how much she walks, it's going to be a life of, or at least as her mother sees it, right? A life of nicht der Gehen, of not being able to go. And it's probably not just Tybala, but her own, right? Das Engschaft von nicht der Gangene Zielen. It's possibly her own, right? All the hopes that you have for your child are just, they're never going to be realized. And, you know, it's a sad, it's, I think it would be a very sad thing for a parent, but obviously the love, die Liebschaft zu ihr is, yes,
Could it
question?
be that it constricts her?
I'm sorry,
I
could you
just got the sense that it constricted her when I heard the translation. Not that it caught her breath, but that
yes,
it held her and it constricted her
that's
with the
how,
worry.
Mhm.
I mean, how else would you say that in Yiddish?
Yeah, no, I think I would say very good, constricts my breath or constricts my breathing, right? Something like that. Yeah, that always in relation to Tybala, there's just something unrealized, you know, something not fully developed, not breathing fully, something arrested. But yet, you know, there's this this feeling, you know, that after she's visited Bela, always feels somehow empty, you know, empty by longing for her, perhaps longing for the things that she'll never get from her as the mother, you know, for all the joys that are not gonna ever be able to materialize, but still, you know, it's real longing and love. I think this is just such a beautiful, gorgeous poem. Okay, let's go on to another poem. This is a Chorbenlied. Und die Schreiberin heißt Asya Kuritzky-Guy. Sie hat sich gerufen Asya, like Madonna. Und wie wir sehen von der Date, as you can see from the date, 1932, she would have been a young girl during the Holocaust. Sie ist von Vilna. I don't know exactly what her, you know, Holocaust story was, but just given the date, clearly there was one. And she apparently was running with her mother, okay, who also, as the poem tells us, was very young. Mother, my Jewish mother, they didn't allow you to cry your Yiddishkeit. You didn't coo over me like a dove, didn't nourish me with scraps torn from your mouth, the clay-like bread, a few bites like children we tore into 2 equal parts, measuring it out exactly. Eyes full of hunger, on roads full of terrible wonders, leaden hatred raining down upon you, a sack covering your slender loins. A mother orphan, you walked alongside your child who had so aged within hours, mother child of the wide river Velia, robbed of your young dream in later days. May you be blessed. Here, let's just take a look. Here's Bela over to the left, Bela, and here is Asya with a very kind of modern, yeah, 80s looking hairdo. Okay, she ended up in Israel, actually. Mame, Mein jiddische Mame, man hat nicht gelost dir dein Jiddischkeit weinen. Du hast über mir wie a Träub nicht geworket, mit Brecklach von Mäul abgerissene, mich nicht gekormet. Das lehmige Bräut, a paar Bissen, wir haben wie Kinder ab zwei gleiche Teilen zerrissen, mit pinklichen Massen, Augen voll Hunger. Abwägen von schrecklichen Wunder, mit bleierner Sinne beregend, a Sack über Lendendare behangen, a Mame je Säume, beim Seid von dein Kind bist du gegangen, was hat sich geältert in Scheuen. Mame Kind von der Breiter Willie, begaselt von jungen Cholem in später Tag, gesund sollst du sein. Okay, I just like to draw your attention to this line here. Beim Seid von dein Kind bist du gegangen, was hat sich geältert in Scheuen. It's not totally clear who is doing the getting old in a matter of hours, and maybe it could apply to both of them. Okay, so da haben wir ein Lied, was bringt heraus sehr, also ich verstehe, sehr gemischte Gefühle, very ambivalent feelings. What are these feelings? What's going on here? What's she telling us about? So this is later, right? She's looking back on this later at a time when they are what? They're running, right? Sandläufen. Clearly the Nazis are here with their Wegen von schreckliche Wunder. Okay, and they're having bullets, leaden hatred raining down upon them. Okay, so this is war and they're running. And what is or isn't her mother doing for her? Is this the typical, oh, my mother, she sacrificed everything for me just so I could live? The woman was a saint? No. Judith, you look like you had a thought. Judith Kennedy. Do you want to unmute?
Can I speak then?
Yeah, she didn't, but she couldn't. And to me, this is almost like the last poem where the mother had the grief for the daughter. And the daughter now, I think, in spite of the fact that her mother couldn't, she realizes later her mother couldn't do stuff for her. So she feels grief for what not only she lost, but what her mother lost. That's how I think of it.
Are we being too kind? Her mother couldn't. I mean, there are mothers who did give their children their last bite of bread. Jan Tamash writes a story about that called Breut. So
we're not all that. How can I put it? It's almost like,
we're not
loving
all that
anyway, an imperfect mother, let's put it that way. And where did they get that? That was a little unclear to me. Where did they get the clay-like bread?
Who knows?
So they did, but they did get, they didn't die. They got food somehow. But
Somehow they had food, right? Yeah, we don't know, and we don't have to know. We just know they had this little crust of bread. But I mean, I think, yes, Dorothy.
Oh, I wanted to say in that it's about the 10th line where it says a few bites.
Right.
And the Yiddish is for bissel. You said you used a more appropriate word that didn't just suggest quantity, but deprivation. I thought you were reading, you read it differently than the Yiddish. And I think that what the word you used was more powerful.
I don't remember, but I didn't mean to improve upon.
No, that's no, but a few is just a quantity. But the word in Yiddish is suggesting something aside from the quantity, that it's a diminished quantity.
Brecklach, mit Brecklach von Moil, yes, is scraps torn from the mouth. Okay, so I think what's so striking about this is, at least at the beginning, it's all about, she's mad at her mother, I think, although she evolves in the poem. It's all about what she didn't do for her, right? You didn't coo over me. You didn't nourish me, right? You didn't. Yeah, it's okay. War is hard. I get it, but I'm your kid and you're my mom. And other
But
mothers,
they didn't allow you to.
they didn't allow you to cry your Yiddishkeit. That's something else. And we can, if we have a minute, which I don't think we can, we can discuss that. Yes, but that's good. She puts it in the frame of that, okay, you couldn't maybe be a normal mother, but this is all, and this is what I remember. This is what you didn't do for me. Und das Lemike Bräut a paar Bissen. Wir haben wie Kinder ab zwei gleiche Themen. So she says, like children, we tore this bread into 2 equal parts, measuring it out exactly. I think she's very resentful.
Right.
What kind of mother are you that is not giving your child at least a little bit more?
More.
So I think, this poem just kind of, it shatters all these sort of lovely feelings, that we like to have about mothers. But on the other hand, we can't say, sie ist nicht im Ganzen onrachmanis und on Mitgefühl für der Mamen. And what do we know about the mother? She says, Mamenkind von der breiter Willier.
The mother just lost her own parents and most likely lost her husband and maybe another child. And I would put it to you that the mother wasn't necessarily not nourishing her with food, but maybe the emotional support that
both, yeah,
that the daughter needed. And maybe the food becomes the literal translation of, Mom, you weren't giving me more emotional support. We were just trying to feed off of each other, and I needed more emotional support than you were giving me.
Okay, well, I think we should literally understand that she wasn't giving her that much food, but I don't think that's a metaphor. I think that's real, but I think you're right that with that also came obviously the emotional support. But Josefa, did I see a hand there? Yes.
Yes, I in defense of the mother, not giving giving up her portion of this little scrap. I'm assuming that the Germans probably handed out once a day a little scrap of bread, whatever. On airplanes, they always tell you that if the oxygen is cut off,
right,
the parent should put the mask on himself first, and then the child. Because if you don't, you try to give the child first, the parent will pass out and then cannot help the child, can't help anyone. If the mother doesn't feed herself, she will, this is a small child, she's like 9 years old or whatever. If the mother lets herself die, then there's no one to protect her little girl anymore. So that's why that the equal, just to make sure, because you're in such dire hunger, that if you don't really police yourself and split this food exactly down the middle, somebody's going to have more than they should and somebody's going to die. So I'm defending the mother.
I think that's the brilliance of the poem, in a way, that we kind of get this split perspective. Like, this is what I felt as a child, maybe, like you weren't sharing with me, you were acting like a child. But I also realize now what great loss you suffered, a mama yesoime, and she calls her mama kin. The mother herself was very young. and von jungen Cholem bagazelt von jungen Cholem in später Tag. She realizes the mother's whole life was robbed of her somehow, that you never quite recover from this. Oh goodness, we only have like about 2 or 3 minutes, but Golda.
No, you said exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. Okay, Susan.
Yeah.
Öffnen dein Mikrofon, ja?
Lomer hoben mayor wie du bist gerecht. Agree completely. It's really a praise of her mother. She now realizes what her mother, maybe she resented it at the time, but she now realizes what her mother went through, and she's alive to prove it.
Okay. I mean, I think it's very mixed, but she realizes also as an adult. I mean, we see everything here, which is why I think this is a fantastic poem. Nina?
I was just going to say something that somebody else had already said, that I think that the author realizes that under different circumstances, her mother would have been much more nourishing, much more supportive, able to give her the emotional support that she longed for. But look what the circumstances were. They were running for their lives. Can you imagine the fear, the tension, the horror of what was going on, that the mother was just so focused on surviving both and saving her daughter and saving herself. They were running, and the circumstances were such that she couldn't be the sweet, loving mother who would sing to her child and things that she would do under different circumstances.
Yeah. I want to leave us with something more uplifting or less conflicted. And this one is just a kind of delightful poem. I'm becoming my mother. And I think as we age and we, every time I hate to say this, but complain that the coffee is cold in a restaurant, I'm thinking, oh my God, I've become my mother. I mean, my mother was very sweet and lovely, but she hated her coffee to be cold, things like that. She wasn't pushy. She wasn't an aggressive, stereotypical. And you might notice none of these poems are anything like the American stereotype of the Jewish mother. That's like a complete myth, I think, or whatever. But yeah, there's just little things we do and say and feel, and that like, oh my God, I'm just like my mom. I look into my looking glass. Please tell me, glass, is that face me? It seems to me it's come to pass. My mother's face looks back at me. The wrinkles deep, the tired gaze, the hair already streaked with gray. In years gone by, her later days, she looked precisely just that way. But when and how did all this start? Quite suddenly, it seems to me. Perhaps I see my mother's face because of active fantasy. But no, it's true. I see my mother's every line reflected in my face. It's you. Her tired old face becomes now mine. Guck ich sich in Spiegel ein, sag mir, wie viel bin ich alt? Erstes guckt in immer rein, gar mein Mame, Gestalt. Runzeln, knetschen, mi der Blick, in die Haar schon passmes Greu. Wie mit Jahren lang zurück, ausgesehen hat sie a so. Wenn und wie ist das geschehen? Ot hat so sich plötzlich gar. Efter hab ich sie der sehen, ot hat sind in Dimmen gar. Nein, sie's wahr, sie's wahr, sie's wahr. Ich seh der Mames Strich nach Strich auf mein Ponym schneidig klar. Ich wär allein, mein Mame, ich. Okay, I have to let you go, but thank you so much. And let's, lassen wir sich sehen weiter auf Simchas. Okay, thank you so much. Seid gesund.